What up, everybody? Esoteric Eddie here. Namaste. Alright, so this video is an Instagram live that I did with an awesome guest, Salma, and she is a student of theology, specifically American Christianity, and she's also a professional tarot card reader, among many other things. I had a lot of audio issues on my end with this Instagram live, so I went ahead and edited out pretty much all the parts where I'm talking and asking the questions. So it might be a little weird or difficult to follow, the thread of what we're talking about, but I'm sure you're still going to enjoy it. So check it out. Peace.
But I think people got that I'm a student, and I just wanted to say, like, I never imagined that I would be practicing astrology and tarot. I mean, like, as a professional practice where it's a service that I'm offering. But I discovered I grew up with astrology actually. So it wasn't something that I came across on the internet. My family was very much into astrology. I grew up in a very spiritual family, which we'll talk about a little bit more eventually. Um, and yeah, so it was just kind of like learning as I was growing up. Like by the time I was 10, I knew like my big three. I would tell people I'm a Sagittarius, Sun, Leo, Moon, Capricorn rising, but I didn't know what it meant. So it just like with time, I started learning more and more, and it was kind of like a hobby on the side. And even when I was in high school, I loved astrology. I would always talk about astrology to my friends. Um, and it was kind of like after the pandemic, I people had a lot of free time, of course. And so it just came some like a sort of more intense pastime where I would just be getting completely immersed into it, um, like every day. And then I discovered tarot, and like a lot of people, and you would be surprised, I had also like judgment about tarot before I got into it. I was like, no, like I'm not gonna practice tarot. It sounds not fake, but I was like, it just sounds like I'm taking advantage of people. That's the image that I had. So I was super afraid to start doing tarot, but it was like in January 2021. I just started doing it like for my friends, and from that, my friends would tell other people, and people in my circle would be interested in getting a reading. It was like these like really short $10 readings. And so it kind of grew. And September 2021, because I had so many people asking me, like, are you gonna do birth chart readings? Are you gonna do this? Are you gonna do that? And that's how I told myself, like, let's just jump into it. And it became a business. And fast forward like a year later, I'm basically like filing taxes as a small business owner.
So you're comfortable with tarot.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, so you're comfortable with tarot.
Yes, now, yes, yes. I
don't
have
even know.
the title.
Is there like a article you call your tarot? Tarot.
I think we're still having problems with the sound. It's sorry, it's so frustrating.
Yeah. um, how much time is in the chat?
Let me just maybe. Okay, I'm just gonna put the volume up. Maybe it's gonna help me on my side.
All right, all right. You sounding all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Not the astrology. Oh, with tarot, it wasn't a specific person, honestly. So it was just I was seeing people do it as kind of. I mean, a lot of people where I live do tarot just as a form of entertainment, and I was like doing it with my friends. We would go on picnics, and have like a tarot deck and try to read it, obviously with the little booklets, or like at a party, and you would like draw one card and stuff like that. So it wasn't a specific person who introduced me to tarot, but it was my grandparents who introduced me to astrology.
Astrology,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I was a kid. It was probably like, I don't know, like 7 years old. And it was kind of just a thing that my family would talk about astrology in the bigger sense. It wasn't like very like detail oriented, or the type of content that we see online right now. So it was more just talking about astrology because it's a thing, and talking about what sign are you, and this sign is like this and this sign is like that, um, and reading my birth chart as well. But because I also come from a Muslim family, so it wasn't a natural thing. It's just my grandparents were like really into more spiritual stuff, and that's also because my grandpa was kind of like this rebel hippie, and also a Sufi Muslim. So he's more into a spiritual, more esoteric branch. Um, so that's how he introduced me to that. And my childhood was also just very naturally spiritual. Um, oh yes, spiritual experiences for sure. Supernatural, paranormal, maybe a bit less, but the spiritual experience really like from birth and even before my birth. So when I was born, it's natural in Morocco to hold kind of like an event for 7 days after a baby is born. It's kind of also how they kind of name the baby as well. So it's always a big event. But for me, and because I guess my grandparents were so dramatic and so happy to have me in their life, because I'm also the first grandchild. And I was the only grandchild for 19 years. So it's only recently that I had a cousin. Um, and so my grandpa, because he was really into Sufi Islam, and um, also transcendental music and meditation. So he called what we call gnawa in North Africa. So it's a type of music that was originated by um, black people in North Africa, and it's really about worship, and it's about struggle. And a lot of times when people with this music, it's like a trance experience as well, where people just purge out energy. So that's what my grandpa did for like 4 days back to back, from day to night. We had like people coming in and out of my grandparents' house, and just these music, and it never stopped in this band. And um, I mean, the adults would even stay the whole night awake, just some kind of, I guess, some kind of purging out of energy. And also because the funny thing is that my birth happened during like a grieving time as well, because my great grandpa died a few days after I was born. So it was like these two events happening at the same time, like birth and death. So I guess they just chose a way to kind of combine the two. My family, of course, that was like the foundation, but also throughout my teenage years, I struggled a lot with mental health. So um, being spiritual was kind of this um, not escape. It was this great coping mechanism, and also it helped me. I do have some radical thought about how to heal mental health. So
Let's hear it.
so well, for me, from my experience, and this is not to advance any type of agenda, but because I was like on all these medication, antidepressants, and I was just like feeling dead. Like I was not a functioning human being. And when I turned 18, I had a really bad burnout. Yeah, a burnout at 18. So I had a really bad burnout where I couldn't do anything. I dropped out of school. I couldn't leave my bed for like 3 months. Um, and so I was like, I'm not gonna live my life like this. So I just took one decision, and I was like, off, like screw this medicine, screw these pills. Um,
Yeah.
I'm just reading at the same time the questions that are interesting.
Uh,
Yeah, we'll get into that. Um, so so yeah, I took that decision, and just like I took it upon myself to help myself, and that's when being spiritual came in, but like in a really more methodical, yeah, methodical way, where I was like, it's not just this is where I come from and it's all up in the air. It's like me doing my own research and trying to help myself. So being spiritual helped me a lot. Philosophy too helped me. So I was really into philosophy, and I was trying to just to understand things around me and why do I feel like this, and religion as well. And of course, when you grew up, especially if you grew up Muslim, and when it comes to where I'm from, unfortunately, I also have other cultural backgrounds. So it's gonna get more complicated. It's just getting more complicated as we go. So I am Moroccan, but my mom is also Spanish, but not fully. So my great grandpa, the one I was talking about, who died a few days after my birth, he was a Gitano from Andalusia, from Spain. So he was kind of also from the Romani people of the south of Spain. But he was an orphan, and we don't know where he's from. We have no idea, like, what my complete cultural heritage is. So he left Spain because of the Franco regime, um, and because he was also a practicing Muslim during the Franco regime in the south of Spain. And so he went to Morocco, met this woman who was also an orphan. Yeah, so they were like studying together, and at that time it wasn't like a necessity for women, young girls. 'Cause she was a young girl at that point, to go to school. Like they would be into nursing or stuff like that, or just help out on the land. And so in northern Morocco, especially, there aren't a lot of big cities. So they met, they got together, they were like um, just studying spiritual Islam together, studying the Quran and stuff like that. And that's kind of how they fell in love. And then they had my grandpa, who's an only child. So I don't know my full family story. I just know this. But that definitely made me have some crisis, even in my own country in Morocco, because I grew up there. I only moved to Canada when I was 10. So I grew up there. And even in Morocco, there's this mentality of blood quantum a bit, where it's like,
what was the
blood quantum.
What is that?
Like, you have, when you say, like, you have to be like 100% white or like 100% black, and that kind of defines your whole heritage, and there's no place for nuance, you know what I mean? And so even in Morocco, there's a bit this mentality, because everybody knows almost where they're from, and there are also very known last names, so it's like, oh, what family do you come from? And I would tell my last name, and even my last name from my father's side is not very typical. It's only my family who has it. So I was like, who am I? And then my family on my mother's side, my mom is like half from Spain, and she cannot trace back her lineage even because my great grandpa was a refugee.
Yeah. It was a mission.
Yeah, so I was always like in a crisis, and I was like, is my identity like valid, and also how I view my religion, because like you're all the Morocco is very open minded and all of that. There is a sense, just a sense of pride to be a Muslim and to be Moroccan. At first, they didn't take it seriously. It's not that they were against it, but they were like, "Huh, that doesn't make sense." But
Yeah.
then they were like, "Well, it would be kind of like they would be hypocrites if they're like, you can't do that," because they kind of introduced me in a way to it.
Mm.
Although it wasn't like a serious, let's say, serious thing or whatever. I grew up in a family that was um, very like education oriented. My great grandpa, he's also studied religions, and because he also always had this guilt of being into uh, esoteric knowledge, because he was really interested in that, he became super religious, but he didn't leave the esoteric part of religion, but he became just super religious, and he became an imam, so he was leading prayer.
Mm.
So there was always this guilt in my family, and still now, like because my grandma also has this esoteric side. She like prays so much every day. Like obviously there's the five prayers, but she goes beyond that, just to tell you how much there's this internalized guilt of straying away from religion, because also in Islam, if you, let's say, if you're really into some esoteric or some or astrology, stuff like that, it kind of counts as um, not blasphemy, but it's what we call shirk. It's like when you idolize, let's say, like idolize other things than God. Sense of guilt, of course, like always behind. But I try to not think about it, and also I remind myself I have all this mix of cultural influence in my life, and all of, like, I'm just a mess of things and of all of the things that my grandparents taught me. So obviously I have a different experience of life than, for example, some of my Muslim friends who grew up in a very conventional environment. So I try to not compare myself to that. And I also try to not always justify what I'm doing. And especially because I'm a theology student too, like that doesn't help. Like that's piling up even more. But I just try to see it as there's something to learn from every religion, and I try to not confine myself into this or that.
Yeah.
And my grandpa was also like that, so he kind of taught me how to be, and he still is. Even in, usually we think of, when we think of older people, they come at a certain age and they become like super religious or super conventional. But for my grandpa, it's never the case. Like I call him on FaceTime, and we do tarot readings together. And
Really?
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like for Christians, it's even more predominant actually, because Islam always also focuses on knowledge and asking questions. Like, if you ask a Muslim, there's always going to be it's a religion built on dialogue, and that's why we have like lectures where you can ask the imam, like, is this right for me to do or not? And there's always a certain dialogue that is made. But I feel like, for Christians, it's a bit more, and especially if you're um, a Catholic, that's even, there's the rules are here, and that's all you have, and
Yeah,
deal
you
with
know
it.
Yeah, everything's going to have.
And also, like the confession booth, it's all about secrecy. So there's always a sense of secrecy and suffering in being a Christian. Uh, in the U.S., so religion in the U.S. Um, I also I chose Christianity in the U.S. because it's also something so far away from me.
Yeah.
Like I have no, like, let's say, direct experience with that. So I was obviously very curious about it. And also, it's because Americans like to neglect the fact that the whole country is built on that. It's built on Christianity. It's built on the Bible. Like the first settles, the colonizers actually, they wanted to create a new Israel for the people. That was how the U.S. was born, and so I think Americans like to kind of neglect that from the past, where they're like, no, 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 or even have this mentality of like North and South, and actually it's the South that uh, created all these problems around the Bible and around like their agenda to make people's life harder with the racism and white supremacy. But it's like also the North, and honestly, we can talk about it for hours because I'm really passionate about this.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
what we call clan Christianity too, that's also very prevalent until now in the culture. So I think a lot of things obviously shock me and surprise me, but I think I've always been this person who, like, if we want to find solutions, we have to learn where the problem comes from first.
Yeah.
I think it's my I wish. um I feel like my friends will find this very funny because they've always told me, um when I was in high school, they would tell me like I would have a career in politics. But no, I feel like maybe what I would like to do is, I'm really into theory, and obviously like when you write and people read you, they have you push them to think in a more critical way. I don't think I have the solution, and I think also the solution lies in the hand of people in power, but not just people in power, also like people in the United States. And I feel like because this kind of mentality of we only learn what's in school and that's it, it doesn't help, and it doesn't open a dialogue. And also because I grew up in a very Eurocentric and even like French-centric school system, I find it hard when engaging conversation with Americans. And obviously I even visited the US multiple times, and a lot of my clients are more from the US than Canada. um, there's always like this fear of dialogue.
Mm.
Because
Why is
there's
that?
I think it's because the US has a very like binary, very black or white thinking, where it's like either you're racist or you're not racist. You're white or you're black. You're oppressed, not oppressed. You're religious, not religious. Um, Whereas, for example, in Europe or other countries of the West, there's a place for nuance, and also people don't get offended when you call them out. Like if I were to talk with some, that's what people don't understand. It's like just because I'm engaging in conversation with somebody who has a different opinion than me, it doesn't mean I don't like them or I hate them or I'm trying to um, be like the origin of their downfall. Like no, I'm interested in conversation, dialogue, And that doesn't mean we're gonna agree, and that's okay. We don't have to agree about everything. And I don't know if you remember, but that reminds me of on Twitter that girl who I told her to not make a Nazi joke, and she went and took screenshots of me talking about astrology and was like, "Oh, you're really listening to her when she talks about astrology," as if like to say. So she got offended instead of being like, and her immediate response was like, "I'm gonna attack your values." And she even took a, a tweet about Jesus, and I think she thought I was like a Christian or something. I'm like, you have like there's no thought behind your process. You're just like attacking values and identity politics out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, another very deep question to ask to somebody who studies theology. Um, I don't talk a lot about my personal beliefs. Obviously, yes, I believe in God. You can call it God. You can call it source. You can call it whatever you'd like. So it's not much about. I tend that's the thing also. I tend to not focus too much on the language because the language is always going to be adapting and changing according to the culture, according to like where you're from, and so many other factors. So the language doesn't matter, whatever you call it. I call it God. So um, and for my religious beliefs, sometimes it's hard, honestly. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I have a lot of crisis, but it's not the type of crisis where I'm like, oh, I don't believe in God. No. It's the type of crisis where I'm like, okay, but this religion also has a lot to offer. And, like, okay, like, not everything that's in the book kind of like corresponds to our living and our age and our values today, but there's just so much to learn. And I also grew up Muslim. I would say I'm more of like, yeah, like a Sufi Muslim, if we had to put it in the right words. But that also pushes people from my own religion to attack me.
Yeah.
So I'm being attacked by people who are not from my religion, and also people who are the same religion as me. So it's always like, whoa, well, what am I? What am I? But I try to not go too much into details because I also feel like that's personal. But I would just like to tell people there's a lot to learn from every religion. It doesn't mean you're gonna appropriate it, but at least give yourself the privilege. It's not even give yourself the chance, like give yourself the privilege to learn about other religion. Tarot is a tool. So, and even astrology. So they're both just tools to help you in your life. And by cheat code or secret to life, what I mean is that obviously you can how do I say this? To be able to kind of like get through life and understand what's around you, you kind of have to be an observer. And so not just be like me, this is who I am, and I'm a victim of circumstances happening to me. No, like if you're gonna be like that, you're gonna be unhappy your entire life. So tarot, what it does, it's just gonna make that understanding easier to understand because there's symbols, there's things that are really gonna tickle your subconscious and the collective consciousness as well. So it's just a matter of learning how to communicate with tarot to understand some things happening around you. And you could choose to not use tarot in astrology, but if that like observation and understanding may take you like 20 years, but it could take you a few, like maybe 3 years with tarot. You know what I mean? It's all about taking something so big a big concept and try to make it small and make it understandable for the human mind.
Yeah, I
Let's say more understanding than control, honestly. So it's all about understanding, and obviously, if you have the understanding, maybe like your mind tricks you into thinking you're in control a bit, which is good for the ego. But I don't think it's like control 100%. But it just, I mean, a lot of people, because I know how to read like transits and astrology transits, and I can make decisions according to that, they're gonna think, oh wow, she has control over her life, whatever. But no, it just gives me a better perspective to be able to gauge what's going on. Um, I forgot I was gonna say something. I we'll get into it after.
yeah, that's definitely just getting understanding.
Yeah, it's really about understanding. Yeah. I was, well, my grandpa was Sufi. So not my entire family, but I would say in a way I was raised Sufi because I also participated as a child into a lot of like Sufi oriented activities, let's say. And we also had kind of just always this Sufi understanding of Islam, even though we didn't use the word Sufi because it's kind of taboo actually, as a Muslim to say, "Oh yeah, I'm a Sufi," because a lot of people like being be like, "Oh, so you're part of a sect or a cult, something like that," where it has nothing to do with that. Sufism is really just about being understanding your religion and understanding Islam from a soul perspective, and it's a very it's philosophy oriented as well. So the Sufi are gonna see the Prophet Muhammad as like the perfect human being, like the so it's kind of like um, a Neoplatonist type of seeing life, where it's like with beauty comes healing, and the Sufis are also very oriented on beauty. So the beauty of life, like how you present yourself, and also doing things, doing worship in a beautiful way. That's why there's dancing, for example, but that's Turkey. In Morocco, it's different. We have a lot of singing and stuff like that.
Sounds like a fun.
It is. I actually miss it. Like sometimes I wish there was like a community or something, because unfortunately, not in Morocco, but in other countries, it's very like male dominated.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Astrology book. Hold on, I have a list because. um. Okay, so I really like traditional astrology books, and especially medieval Islamic and medieval astrology books. So if you want to take a pen and paper and write down my suggestions. So it's so different from the astrology we know, okay? So Al-Biruni, who used to be a philosopher and also an astrologer, it's the book of instructions in the elements of the art of astrology. Really into like symbolism. Sometimes he's very misogynistic, but you know. And another one who's a bit more eccentric compared to Al-Biruni is Abu Mashar. Abu Mashar. It's the great. Oh, there you go. So it's the great introduction to the science of the judgment of the stars.
yeah, I mentioned him in my.
And for like more, Western understanding of astrology, we have Ptolemy, Tetra Biblos, which is the the four books, sorry, and Almagest. Yep. Also, sorry, I'm gonna call out people, but stop typing the books that you're looking for. Like, go to a bookstore or the library. The library is there and it's free.
Yeah.
And so not only you're gonna have the physical book, but also you can ask questions, and I'm sure there are people there who are gonna help you. And if you cannot borrow the book, you can actually consult it at the library, and you save money, you save time, and you also get to be in direct contact. I think reading and contact with books and like the reality of book culture is very important, and it's kind of like dying. I don't want to go to a tangent, but there's so much to say. So yeah. So yes, that is a reality of tarot, and especially in traditional tarot. However, when I started doing tarot, that was my technique, and I was very much into. I meditate a lot. Um, I kind of been lacking on that lately, but like I love meditation. Uh, but that helped me, of course, just channeling messages and stuff like that. But the thing is, you have to adapt to people. And because I went from doing tarot, because I did tarot to a business, let's say, I couldn't stay in that model of doing tarot. So I had to adapt it, and now it's like a mix of intuition and psychology. And I use tools of psychology, of course, and I've always been really good at reading people. I'm a good observer. I like to observe people and their behavior and how they speak. So that helps me. Obviously, I use this and I'm very transparent about it. Like, I'm not going to tell you, oh no, it's all a gift, because that's not true. Uh, and also, it would be very tiring for me spiritually and emotionally if all I'm doing is like channeling messages or trying to tap into somebody else's energy all the time. So I had to adapt because I had more clients. But I adopted a very Jungian um, method when doing tarot and even doing astrology. So I'm never gonna tell people this is what you have to do and be like, this is what is gonna happen to you and this is what. No, it's like we are trying to decode what you already know, and I'm just like telling you all of this in words, concrete words. So I'm just like a messenger of things that you already know.
Messenger,
Yep.
just guiding the people to the wrong way.
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, guiding, providing insight, but also just tapping into things that people sometimes don't want to face. And that's also, I don't get offended anymore when people don't like the experience. It happens rarely, but it still happens. And especially because I do tarot readings at a bar. So so it's like people who come from a type of entertainment, but it's also people sometimes who have this notion of tarot where it's like I'm a fortune teller.
Yeah.
And I come up and I'm like, I'm a young woman and I'm gonna read your tarot, and they're like, what's going on here? And so sometimes they're disappointed, I would say. But I don't feel offended because I'm like, it's just me kind of tapping into your energy. So if you're not open, of course the tarot reading is not gonna move you.
Yeah.
This, by the way. So it's been a while. So this person, his name is Isaac. He started doing jazz and tarot in Montreal, and then it kind of picked up into this bar. And in the last no, not 2 years. In the last year, actually, after the pandemic, when the bar started opening again here in Montreal in Canada, that's when like people started really getting interested. And of course, well, funny thing, I was a client at this bar before I even did tarot.
Mm.
So
That's
yeah, that's very interesting. So, and when I discovered there was like jazz and tarot, I was like, wow, I love jazz, I love tarot. So I went there one night to get my cards read. And then I started talking with the host, and they were like, "We're looking for a tarot reader." And like I started like the week after, and it kind of picked up. And also because I know some people, so a lot of people who know me would come, and then it just like started picking up, and it's going great. And people come because they're curious. They're like, "Wow, jazz and tarot. We've never heard about an event like this."
Yeah, sorry.
Honestly, I think that we should use astrology as like a global humanistic movement, because I feel like our society now, we have made so much improvements, whether in science and technology. Obviously, we still have a bit more to go with human rights, but at least we are like conscious of it. Um, but I think we can use astrology to kind of shape, um, like a new society, which is ironic because the first civilizations, they all used astrology to build their society. um, so I feel like we would actually benefit from that. And we love science so much. Of course, we love binary thinking because it's simple. It's like either this or that. If you don't believe in this, then you believe in that. If this doesn't happen, that means the opposite happens. um, so I feel like we're tired, especially because of this pandemic that just happened. Our mind is tired, our body is tired. So I feel like astrology can become this pursuit for something else than just what we have in the moment. Um,
Yeah, it'd be kind of like,
to our roots, but also just reshaping something, reshaping a global philosophy, to be honest. And it's gonna also help us understand that, like life doesn't happen, and society even doesn't happen always in a linear model. Like it's always cycles, and that's what astrology is. But I feel like we should also stray away from this like new, very um, like white supremacist model of astrology that
yeah,
people have no idea what they're talking about. So yeah, that's the thing about growth. It's not, we want to think that it's like gradual, like step after step, and it gets better. But another thing about following a very cyclical way of seeing life. And also, I'm very much against people who use like this idea of chronic healing, where it's like, yeah, like wake up at 5 a.m. and meditate for an hour and stuff like that. And I'm just like, no, no. First of all, not everybody can be able to do that, either mentally or physically or like, economically. Like people are not able to dedicate so much time into healing and into like this very chronic and um, very like scheduled type of healing, and go to therapy for an hour and then go read a self-help book for another hour and then go for a walk. Like that's not how it works. So it's all about knowing your body. And also, I'm the type of person, I try to not pressure myself to do so many things and to be always healing. So I allow myself to be in a low mood. Like I do this very often. And there's no shame about that. Like if I feel very, very low, um, and if I feel like I have no intention or like no will to do anything, I stay in that energy. And it happens to me a lot. And as somebody who struggled so much with mental health growing up, um, it's all about tempering yourself and knowing when to stop. So if necessary, I isolate myself and I cry, and that's about it. Um, and then I go back to my day, and it's like it is a new day. And astrology also helps me because I know that there are certain times where people are just not okay, and we just need some time alone.
So you allow yourself to feel it out.
Yeah, I allow myself to let it out.
All right. So,
It's not just about like being feminine or traditional values, but I understood, and especially in the last 2 years, that I wanted to restructure my life in a way that's gonna be fulfilling for me emotionally, um, and they're gonna also cater to my spiritual needs. Um, in terms of like divine feminine, uh, sometimes I want to say like leave that word alone. Like just leave it alone for a bit. We're tired of. I feel like some people use it to like put so much pressure on women. It's already hard to be a woman, um, no matter how you present yourself. So like leave it alone, and actually like what we need is a society that is not just built on survival, which is pretty hard to have. Like we can't have it like from one day to another. Uh, so I feel like people use this word, this term of or concept of divine feminine to just reshape some patriarchal thinking. They're just like recycling the patriarchy and being like, "Oh, this is what you should do as a woman," and it was never the case. And I feel like everybody can benefit from, let's say, feminine energy. I feel like even men. When I hear people say, "Oh, a man needs to be in his masculine energy and a woman needs to be in her feminine energy," I just want to like throw myself out the window because I'm like, no, even men, not like we have been living in masculine energy for centuries. We all need to slow down and just live life and learn how to nurture again. And especially for men, especially straight men, like they can benefit a lot from having this uh, mentality of nurturing themselves and also others and not and it's sad because that's something I talk about a lot too. Like I recently I said something about like how men, like a lot of women will say that men are incapable of loving, and I'm just like, no, that's just they have it in them, but it's just how they're socialized. And they're like, oh, so you're pick me, you're defending man, and I'm like, that was never the case. All I'm saying is that we say we don't give. Oh no, we say like men are not nurturing and sensible enough, but then we turn around and um, yeah, it's just about joining energy and try to balance out the two. I
absolutely.
think these influencers, and especially I don't know, like spiritual influencers or whatever they call themselves, well, they're getting everything wrong. We're not gonna sit here and be like, this is what and this is, and nitpicking everything that they do, but it's like how they approach things, um, and it's not even to sound like I know better. I just feel um, I feel bad because there are a lot of young women, and even not so very young women, who are gonna listen to these other women's, and they're gonna follow like these really mediocre advice and mediocre knowledge, and also these women who kind of like put themselves out and try to give advice and try to give advice and bypass spiritual thought. They're like themselves very lost.
Yeah.
So it's like it's okay as women to admit that we are lost, that we don't know, because there was always this pedestal of viewing women, and even women viewing ourselves as like we have the monopoly on love, and we have the monopoly on nurturing and how to operate in the world because we had to survive so many things. and adapt. So yes, that is true, but we can't just always have this sort of mindset and always see like present ourselves as like we know better and we're not gonna listen to the advice of other people that have not the same experience as us. And this is a problem, especially for straight women. And when they do this, not only they're like preying on vulnerable young women, but they're also a lot of them erase um, bisexual women or like lesbians, and it's very homophobic and transphobic. So there's like so many layers to it, and people don't realize because there's so much trapped in their little bubble. Um, and it's also, unfortunately, a lot of them are white. So it's also this mentality of like weaponizing being a white woman, uh, and so you use spirituality that you appropriate from other cultures to kind of advance your like your own agenda, whatever it is, whether you have like a set agenda or not. Um, so yeah, they don't have a lot of integrity too. So it's like it's crazy because I see these creators. People ask them questions. They're gonna say something. They're gonna put a statement out there, and it's gonna be like, oh, like a life changing statement. And then people are gonna ask them, can you elaborate? And they're gonna be like, no, 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 no. It's too complicated. You guys are not gonna get it. So I also have a problem with that, where it's these spiritual workers who say things and they don't explain. They just want to create sensation. They just want to create, just I don't know, polemics or whatever. So I have also a problem with that. And they're like, well, you're not gonna get access to what I know if you don't buy my course or if you don't follow. And I'm like, it's like, you're using the word karma and chakra and doesn't make sense in ways that don't make sense, and you're like, oh, I can't explain. You have to buy my course. It's like, and even for me, like I had to come in terms with that. We're not gonna be doing this our whole life. I'm not gonna be a tarot reader or an astrologer my whole life. But it's the spiritual knowledge behind it that's gonna be ever present. So that's what I'm focusing on. Like right now, it's astrology because it happened to be, which is why I say it's only a tool. It's not like the whole picture. But maybe like imagine like 20 years from now, people don't care about astrology, or like we have a completely different philosophy of life. Um, what are you gonna? What's gonna be your purpose? How are you gonna put out your message? Because you rely so much on tools and on like these little details, and you don't pay attention or invest into like the global picture, the global knowledge. So it's the inner knowledge that counts. It's not like how many coaching sessions you sold. It depends on the context, because I do this sometimes, but it's for entertainment, or when I'm talking to my friends and we're like, oh, this person is, I don't know, this person has Venus in Cancer. We're not gonna, but it can be funny. But I feel like if you're out there educating people on astrology, you can't be like that. So you have to understand nuance. That's very important. Like nuance, please understand nuance, and also just there's more than just the archetypes when it comes to astrology. And if I may like suggest what actually really you know is how I became so passionate about astrology is really with mundane astrology or election. So it's like when mundane astrology is just how to interpret like patterns of everyday life with astrology. You know, like for example, moon phases or stuff like that. or how to link certain placements in astrology to certain things in life. Like that's very cool. Or elections is how to have a certain event or like even take a decision, like what would be the best potential time in regards to the astrology forecast to do this or that. So I feel like when you go into that branch of astrology, you stop thinking about Scorpio, oh, it's this person. And you start thinking more in terms of patterns and in terms of symbols and in terms of events.
Mhm.
I,
I'm
I kind of don't have a career path, let's say, because I'm still a student, but I do different things. Like I'm into different ventures. Um, Sometimes I write, like freelance writing. Um, Obviously, I do astrology and tarot, so that's kind of like my business on the side. Also, I have a certification in perfumery. So that's another thing in my. I feel like I'm doing a job interview. So those are my credentials. Um, but my if I had to like project myself, um, I would say I also I want to be in contact with the arts, of course. So I plan on getting a master's degree in conservation, um, um, and obviously that can open up to many things. But also, as you may see, I'm very into doing my own thing. So I also have this dream of opening my own multidisciplinary learning center with like a library. So like nonprofit, you know, that would be nice. But yeah, I would say always toward learning. That's the
I
goal.
like that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So message.
Yeah.
That's complicated because I feel like messages that you put out in the world can adapt and change, but I would say, I just want to have like some sort of, it doesn't even have to be direct, like just some sort of impact, but not like, oh, she helped me. No, it's like I want to push people to think for themselves, to be curious, because I'm a very curious person. Like if you have a question, go find the answer. I am like that too. If I don't know something, and I want to learn, I'm like gonna keep that in mind, and then I'm gonna really jump into research and try to know as much as I can, so that I can, have, and even if it's something that's not gonna impact my life in any way, at least I took the time to do my research and jump into it and just learning for learning. So my idea of learning like doesn't start and stop in a classroom or lecture. It's kind of always ongoing, and I feel like that also what helps me a lot in what I do right now, and which is why I'm okay if like tomorrow I'm not doing astrology anymore, because I always have a backup, and the backup is my knowledge, and I also want people to see their life like that. So like you have to set your own value and like your own thing, whatever it is, so that you can always go back to it, and you're also gonna approach life like that. So it doesn't matter what you do. It's all about like the approach and the method. So I would say that would be my message. Very simple. Also engage with people, like having conversation. Here we're talking about astrology and tarot, so have also that kind of openness to talk to people about things. And even if at first they reject it, it's not that much of a big deal. They just move on to somebody else.
Yeah. I like that.
Oh, well, my Instagram, and there's also my website in my bio, but I'm always open. I'm not the type of person who's gonna run ads or bombard people or spam people with astrology content, because that's not my philosophy. And if I ever do it, you have the right to insult me, block me, and publicly shame me. I'm serious. So it's all about, and also I like to, and the reason why I don't run ads or do anything like that or spam people is because I want people who are like-minded to seek my services, for example. So, I have no intention of this woman who's 50 years old from Beverly Hills to pay me $2,000 for a service, because we're not gonna agree on, we probably don't have the same philosophy, we don't have the same background. So yes, it's good, but it's not good in terms of learning. So that's my philosophy. So if you're like that, I'm always open to conversation when I have time, of course. But I would say also to respect boundaries, because I feel like people sometimes on social media, they think they know you. And this is like my biggest pet peeve. So just respect people's boundaries, and just because somebody is present on social media doesn't mean they're always there. Like, just have a proper understanding that you follow someone, you don't know them, or you can't even uh, feel entitled for their time. So yeah, whether it's for a conversation, or you're curious about me and want to stalk me, or you're interested in my services, it's all in my Instagram. Thank you.
You're welcome.